Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, lords and ladies. Welcome to the North. I am the self-proclaimed king in the North, and today we're talking more basic strategy tips for the game A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game. Today we're going to dig into all 11 of the different game modes for ASOIAF, and different strategies you might want to employ for each one. The music? Do your stuff. Woo. When it comes to learning A Song of Ice and Fire, there's a lot to remember. If you're playing your first game or so, just pick a basic game mode, leave out the terrain entirely, and just focus on learning how to move units and how units interact with one another. But the king, you say. I've played a couple games already, probably ready to go pro. Oh, you sweet summer child. There's so much more to go, and winter is coming. Now, I don't claim to be a master at all or even most of this game. But the more I play, the more I'm reminded that if I want to win more games, I need to keep the game mode objectives in mind. Killing your enemy's units might be fun, but it's not the only path to victory. In fact, if you're playing a more control-oriented faction like Martell or Lannister, it might not even be your primary path to victory. For any faction, the game mode you're playing can drastically affect how your army performs. So if you know what game mode you're going to be playing, tailoring an army to fit those objectives might not be a bad idea. I know this is a longer video, so I've conveniently chapter marked each game mode in the description below, so you can jump to the ones in which you're most interested. Go ahead, I'll wait. Oh, you're still here? Well, okay, let's start from the beginning. First up is Game of Thrones. For this one, there are 5 objective markers arrayed in an X pattern across the battlefield. Each one has a randomly drawn benefit from the objective deck that will give some small bonus to controlling the objective. In addition, each objective controlled by your units starting at the end of round 2 will score you a victory point. Victory through combat also stipulates that killing an enemy combat unit will also give you 1 victory point. Remember, this is always true across all game modes unless explicitly stated otherwise. I see you back there, Banners and Butchery. Just sit down and wait your turn. A Game of Thrones is a game mode that seems to favor mobility and numerical superiority. The large number of objectives means you can't just focus on combat. A good strategy here might be to have a couple of strong defensive units contest several of the objectives, while some of your more inexpensive or faster units sit on objectives and rack up victory points. Just make sure that you don't abandon your strong units, or your opponents may outflank them, crush them, and then mop up the little ones one at a time. What? This hasn't happened to me. It's also important to pay attention to the objective cards when choosing your side of the table. Give preference to the objectives that give healing or increase your hand size. A Clash of Kings has 3 objective markers spaced evenly across the middle of the battlefield. Each player has access to 2 objective cards that are selected at the beginning of the game. Each time your commander unit activates, you can select 1 card and make use of the effect as if your commander unit is controlling an objective with that effect. Each effect can only be used once per game. In this game mode, controlled objectives score points starting at the end of round 2, and in addition to victory through combat, you score a victory point each time your commander unit destroys a unit, and 2 additional points if your commander unit destroys the opponent's commander unit. This game mode, as the title suggests, is very commander dependent. It's a good idea to have a commander who brings a lot of attachment combat bonuses, so you can take out as many units as possible with your commander. At the very least, put your commander in a bunker-style unit so that they won't be taken out easily. Also make sure that you choose objective cards that synergize with your commander, and don't forget to use them. Since there are only 3 objectives in the middle, it will be much harder to claim uncontested objectives. Be ready to duke it out in the trenches.
Let's get ready to rumble!
A Storm of Swords is an interesting game mode because it is probably the most asymmetrical game mode. It's meant to simulate the storming of a castle fortification. With swords. Get it? Both attacker and defender take 3 random cards from their siege strategy decks. At the start of a round, the attacker can redeploy any destroyed units to their deployment zone, minus any destroyed character figures. The defender only deploys half of their point value of combat units, with the rest in reserve until the beginning of round 3. The defender will also have 3 castle walls at the back of their deployment zone. These walls can be activated like units to do arrow attacks, and they can be damaged by charges and melee attacks. Each wall is worth 5 victory points when it's destroyed, but it will not be removed. This game mode stands out because it is very clearly a defensive game for one side and an offensive game for the other. As the attacker, you want to have units that can deal out a lot of damage, but are also strong against arrow attacks. As the defender, you want strong units that can keep your opponent away from the walls and hold out until your reinforcements arrive. Another nice feature is that the game doesn't snowball the way many other game modes can once one side starts losing units. A steady flow of reinforcements ensures that there will always be more men to feed into the meat grinder for all your gaming fun. A Feast for Crows has a fairly simple setup with only 2 objectives on each side of the board. Each one is on top of a corpse pile. Corpse piles cannot be placed normally as terrain, but believe me, there will be more. Each objective is assigned an objective card. The objectives are linked to the corpse pile. Units can capture the objective just by touching them, but then the controlling unit has to remain in contact with the corpse pile to maintain control of the objective. Sounds sticky. Then, when the first 2 infantry units are destroyed, the owner of the destroyed unit will place a new corpse pile and linked objective completely within long range of that unit. The upshot of this is that although you might have just destroyed an opponent's unit, they now have an objective in a location of their choosing, which can result in some easy victory points for your opponent. Tread carefully. It might be best to target infantry units later in the game. Since corpse piles have the keyword hindering, you'll always lose charge bonuses when any of your unit's tray touches a pile. Most of the combat in this game mode occurs on or near corpse piles, so it's a good idea to bring units that get rerolls automatically or use attachments and NCUs that allow you to reroll dice. You will also need to factor in the keyword horrific and the morale hit you're going to take. Higher morale units will always be a bonus here as well. A Dance with Dragons utilizes 3 objectives, each with objective cards, spread across the middle of the table. Units can capture objectives just by touching them, but then the unit controlling the objective will have its speed reduced to 2 inches, and they can no longer use the march action. Also, the speed cannot be increased by anything. To take an objective point from your opponent, you must have more ranks in your unit, force your opponent to fail a panic test, or of course, kill every last one of them. I meant to say, destroy the unit. This scenario is interesting because it allows you to move the objectives, however slowly that might be. Ideally, you want to capture objectives and then move them to more secure locations on the battlefield so that you can continuously score uncontested points from them. It's important to remember that while your speed cannot be changed, this doesn't impact abilities like tactical reposition or swift reposition. You can still shift as often as you have the ability. For example, archers could be used to capture the objective and then make a 2-inch shift backwards every time they attack. You can also make a retreat action while holding the objective, and this will allow you to add an additional 1 to 6 inches to your movement, backwards or to the side. Just make sure you have some strong defensive units to cover your retreat, and you should have this game in the bag. The Winds of Winter is a typical 5 objective marker setup. At the beginning of the game, each player takes a copy of mission cards 11 and 12, plus 4 additional mission cards of their choice. Starting in round 2, each player reveals a mission card and scores victory points from completing these missions. Objectives do not score victory points unless specifically stated to do so by the mission cards in play. As usual, you can score victory points by destroying your opponent's units. This is a much slower moving game mode, since there are a lot fewer opportunities to score. Since there are fewer opportunities to score, it's important to pick missions that work best with your army. If you're utilizing some really strong Death Star type units, select mission 1, where you score if you control the center objective. If you have a Bolton army that generates a lot of condition tokens, choose mission 8, where you get 1 victory point for each enemy unit where you expend 2 tokens at the end of a round. If you have some fast direwolves, choose mission 6 and sneak into your opponent's deployment zone to score 2 victory points. You can also use Peter Baelish to avoid giving your opponent victory points on missions 2 and 3. So, if you can complete a few missions and keep your units alive, you stand a good chance of winning this game mode. Honed and Ready is a 5 objective marker setup, but in this case, there are impassable castle walls along each side of the battlefield. Points are scored by controlling objective markers in the typical fashion, but any unit controlling an objective on the side of the battlefield will suffer D3 plus 2 hits at the end of a round. Additionally, any NCU can claim a zone and replace its effect in order to force a unit controlling a side objective to suffer D3 plus 2 hits. Obviously, this is simulating a battle being fought between two different neutral castles that are happy to pour down arrow fire on either side equally.
Seriously?
Whatever headcanon you need to use to make this work, this is a game mode that will typically force both sides into the center. Weaker, lightly armed units won't survive attempting to pick up objective points on the outside. Even more heavily armored units will have a hard time taking 3 to 5 hits multiple times per round. For this game mode, a good strategy is to contest the center objective and position yourself to pick up points by taking the side objectives at the end of a round after the tactics board is full. Just keep in mind, the tactics board will be open again at the beginning of the next round, opening you up to a lot of damage if you don't move off the objectives as soon as possible. The best strategy of all might be to position yourself to make sure you win the center objective, and then claim as many objectives as possible at the end of round 6 in order to clinch the victory. Fire and Blood, as the name suggests, is much more combat focused. This is only one of 3 game modes with no objective tokens on the battlefield. Instead, each player will take turns placing an objective marker on 2 of their opponent's units. Each of these marked units will pick one objective card that will give that unit an additional ability, as if that unit were controlling an objective token. Each time a marked unit destroys an enemy unit, they gain 1 victory point. When a marked unit is destroyed, 2 victory points are scored. This means that when a marked unit destroys a marked unit, a total of 3 victory points are scored. And don't forget, this is in addition to the standard victory point that is gained with victory through combat in every game mode. Lastly, each time your commander activates, you can place 1 victory point token on 1 enemy combat unit in long range. These victory points are gained if that unit is ever destroyed. As you can tell, this game mode prioritizes the destruction of some units over other units. Therefore, it can be very useful to prioritize commanders and attachments that enhance your killing power. Speed isn't a large issue because of the 18-inch deployment zone. You are likely going to get into combat very quickly, probably in the first round. Make sure you have a way to protect the units that your opponent marks. They may or may not be your weakest units. Either way, you want to minimize that unit's vulnerability by perhaps keeping them in the back of your formation. Overall, this game mode is very situational. Be aware of what your opponent is trying to do and build an army that is flexible enough to adapt to different approaches your opponent might take. Here We Stand is another of the game modes with no objective tokens on the battlefield. Instead, the battlefield is divided up into 4 quadrants. A quadrant is considered to be controlled if you have at least 5 army points in that quadrant, and you also have more points in that quadrant than your opponent. In addition to combat units, an NCU can, instead of controlling a tactic board zone, be placed on the battlefield to add their army points toward controlling that quadrant. Starting at the end of round 2, players score 1 victory point for each quadrant they control. It's important to remember the threat range of your opponent's units, because with the 18-inch deployment zones, you'll probably come to blows in the first round. In the game. This might also be a good game mode to bring some of your more expensive NCUs like Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, or Tywin Lannister, the Great Lion. If your NCU is worth 5 points or more, they can claim a zone entirely on their own. Furthermore, both Eddard and Tywin's NCU abilities are not tied to taking zones on the tactics board. They can claim quadrants on the battlefield every round without losing any of their effectiveness. Overall, your tactics board play is very important in this game mode, especially towards the end of the game when the combat units start to thin out. Playing your NCUs on the battlefield to help control quadrants can often gain you a lot more than taking the effect of a tactics zone. Don't forget, murderizing your opponents isn't the only road to victory, however much fun that might be. Dark Wings, Dark Words is a typical 3 objective token setup. You will also use the mission deck, but you will remove cards 10 through 12. Draw 2 missions to be the active missions and 2 missions to be the reserve missions. Starting at the beginning of round 3, discard the active missions and replace them with the reserve missions. Then draw 2 new reserve cards. When you deploy NCUs to the tactics board, you may replace the effect with discarding and replacing an active or a reserve mission card. Similarly, your commander unit can forfeit their activation to cycle an active or reserve mission card. Victory points are scored from the objectives at the end of round 2, and at any time from mission cards when you complete the requirements on the cards. Since there are more victory points up for grabs from the missions versus the objectives, it can be a good idea to focus more on the missions than the field of battle itself. Don't concede the objectives entirely, but don't let controlling objectives get in the way of completing missions. For this reason, having a more supportive style control commander instead of a fighting commander can be much more beneficial in this game mode. This way, you can use your commander in addition to your NCUs to cycle to more favorable missions while still benefiting your army on the field through passive effects or order effects like War Cry, Hardened, or Tactical Reposition. Banners and Butchery is the newest game mode, and it's the most dissimilar from all the other modes of play. The deployment zones are half of the board on each side, and the objective markers are placed in the center of each quarter of the board. This is the only game mode where victory through combat is not applicable.
It's okay. I'll get through it. I'm good. I'm good.
Instead, starting in round 2, units that are controlling an objective in the enemy deployment zone may destroy the objective using an attack action. Any friendly unit that does this gains 3 victory points, and a commander's unit gains 1 additional victory point. You also gain 1 victory point when your commander's unit destroys an enemy unit. When an objective token is destroyed, its owner places a new objective token anywhere in their deployment zone that is at least 6 inches from another objective token or the board edge. I think it goes without saying you also want a warrior commander in this game mode, who can spearhead an attack into enemy territory and capture objectives. At the same time, you will need to have some mobile units that can keep the enemy from flanking you and getting to your objectives. It seems like this game mode comes down to winning an all-out brawl in the center of the field and then capturing some of the objectives once your enemy can no longer stop you. That said, I'm going to be honest with you. This one has been a bit difficult to get a read on. If you have differing strategies on this one, please let me know in the comments. Phew! That's it. A breakdown of all 11 game modes for A Song of Ice and Fire. This is one of the things I like so much about this game, is that there are so many different ways to play, and most of them require you to think about the game in completely different ways. It's useful to have a lot of options like this if you're teaching a new player. No, we're not doing that. Enough from the peanut gallery. If you, as an experienced player, are teaching a less experienced player, then playing a game mode that your army isn't really suited for might be a great way to handicap yourself. This is something I always recommend doing when teaching any new game to other people. Ultimately, you don't just want your friends to learn how to play the game, but like playing it with you. I don't think it's any great leap to say that having fun with our friends is something we all want to get from this game and other games. Towards that end, please like and subscribe and share this video with your friends because, as we all know, winter is coming.
Woo!